meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. There's a phrase that I've heard and I've used here many times before. It comes in various forms. I've heard it in various forms over the years. It has to do with an understanding that each of us is a representative of God, and each of us has a ministry. And the phrase goes something like this. There are variations of it. We are called, a few are frozen, come on down, for you are chosen. I'm going to say that again. We are called, or you can say you are called, but many are frozen. Come on down, for you are chosen. And it kind of gets coupled with God's frozen people. And often that gets named for New Englanders in particular, because we're a tough nut to crack at times, all right? Think of it for yourself at times, you know. I'm complaining about the heat in July and the cold in the winter and wondering when it's going to be warm. Then when it gets warm, you complain about that. You know, the whole thing. It's that connection with an image in the church in New England. I would just say the congregational threads of the church in New England being made up of God's frozen people. And the image is one that we chuckle about, but the whole sense of New England reserve sometimes, I think, gets in the way because there's truth to it. And it gives the impression of us generally being cool in our demeanor. But I'd underline that we are called. We may be frozen, and we are chosen. Chosen. And in the choosing, God sends each of us, whether we're aware or not, to share the good news. I included in the bulletin the quote by Martin Copenhaver, which I'll read to you so you don't have to look at it. Those who set out to share the good news often discover that they're changed. They're changed in the process. Good news does not always travel on a one-way street. We not only invite others to join us, but we also respond to the invitation to join others, to learn what they've seen and heard of God's ways and God's Word. We join each other, and we join together in an unfolding journey of discovery and discipleship. We respond to the invitation to join others and to learn what they've seen and heard of God's ways and God's Word. Paul Nickerson sends out a periodic mailing. Paul Nickerson is the UCC minister who helped guide us and other churches in New England, in New Hampshire a few years ago in the church coaching process. But he sends out a periodic email, and the most recent one was focused on reaching new people in our community. And these are his words. In commerce, businesses are looking for repeat customers. In the church world, we're looking for repeat opportunities to see people. I sometimes talk with church folk who think that if they say hi to someone, they ought to then somehow magically show up in church next Sunday. Of course, that doesn't happen. The only way to truly connect with our community is by being out regularly and seeing people multiple times. It isn't just a one-shot deal. Over the course of several encounters, we build a relationship and begin to really hear others' stories and begin to share our story as well. There's no shortcut to building trusting relationships. I wrote in the margin of that, being sent means being patient. You have to be patient with building that sense of sharing and relationship. But it also means you have to get beyond the whole concept, if you hold on to that in any way, that you don't know what to say, you haven't got the right words, and nobody wants to hear what you say anyway. All right? None of that is true. You are gifted, you are graced, you are chosen to be God's representative in this world. So if the frozen mentality sticks with you for some reason, let it go. Let it fall. Because the hand of God is upon each and every one of us here to take a message of hope with us wherever we go. As Copenhagen said, the unfolding journey is of discovery and discipleship. So let's look at the first disciples that were sent out. They went with none of the excess baggage we might have chosen to bring along. All right, I have family members, extended family members, we'll put it that way, because I grew up in a camping family that was very precise about what you brought. Extended family members that when they go camping, they bring a little refrigerator, a toaster, a curling iron, a coffee pot, and they all got to be plugged in. All right? Now, for some of you that might be camping, but you understand what I'm saying. All right? The disciples didn't have any excess baggage that we might choose to bring along. And they certainly weren't encouraged to bring a backpack filled with the stuff you can't do without. No bread, no two tunics, all right? So we could say no change of clothes, all right? No money in your belt, kind of streamlined, all right? And we can certainly take a literal and maybe as well as a figurative lesson from what Scripture has to say. In that, on our journey of life and faith, the discipleship journey that God sends each of us on by virtue of our baptism, by virtue of that touch of grace that's on each of us here. It isn't what we've accumulated in tangible excess that helps. In fact, and often Jesus' stories support this, we know that accumulation can and does hinder faithfulness at times. We also, I believe, have experienced that it is not possible to travel the way of faith when burdened with a backpack of emotional junk that we tend to carry whether we choose to or not. Well, sometimes we choose just to be difficult with one another. It's easier to travel without emotional baggage, and certainly, I think we get the point, then it's easier to travel as disciples without the excess accumulation of one might even, I could even just add in here, that we're God's frozen people. All right? Leave it home. Let it go. Set it aside. Thaw it out. The first disciples didn't have a lot of tangible excess. They just didn't. If they had two tunics, if they had a change of clothes, if they had some money to put in their belt, if they had a piece of bread, it might have been for the day or the day ahead, not much longer than that. So that's a point we have to struggle with ourselves. And Jesus, in other gospel settings, makes it clear that the goods of life don't carry grace in them. They're not going to make everything right with the world. They may for the short term. They may even for the long term. But ultimately, your health, your vitality, your joy in this day, in this time, will come from a relationship built and founded and graced by relationship with God. The mothers and fathers of our church, past and present, tell us the same thing. The same goes to the emotional excess or the emotional drama, the emotional negativity that we love to carry around. I always think of Jacob Marley from, A Christmas Carol, and the clink in the books and iron-fettered boxes that he hauled around that just represented everything that he thought was important and he found wasn't in his conversation with Ebenezer Scrooge. And of course, we know that story unfolds, and eventually Ebenezer gets it right. because I believe he got thawed out by the end of that story. Now it also comes with, we go down the road of forgiving and not forgetting, carrying the hurts of broken relationships or lost love. Maybe it's lack of confidence, or comparing successes, or perceived failures, or getting caught by the sin of go, go, go. And ignoring the cultivation of God's Spirit in our hearts. The first disciples didn't have the centuries of the doctrinal minutiae that we could include in our dalliance with discipleship. They were lucky in many ways. And when we hear stories read from the Bible, and can read the stories on our own when we're not here, we share that simplicity of what the message carries. Because the message was simple. Teach and tell what you've seen and heard. Help one another get beyond hurts. Call out the demons you find. And bring healing in the name of the living God. We think the disciples had something up on us, but we have the same gifts. We share the same grace. When it says they cast out demons, they cast out demons. You can do the same thing. You may think it's a certain way that it has to happen, or you may think that healing only comes in a certain way or a certain pattern. Don't get caught up in what you can't explain. Be embraced by what is there before you. The disciples were graced. They went. They brought healing. They helped people get beyond pain and hurt. And they certainly gave evidence of God's love. Each of us offers hope, presence shared, and our experiences of love and caring and humility. I believe this being sent stuff comes down to give and take. There's a catch for us in that it's up to us to make sure that the give and take is done across the board in a manner that doesn't negate or eliminate a person or persons because we don't like them, or we're fearful, or because there's difference. Think of Jesus. Think of Jesus. He learned himself when face to face with either his own fears or dislikes or differences. And yes, the first disciples didn't have to deal with your family or mine, all right, yeah, or your neighborhood situation or your fears. They had their own. And we can be reminded that life in the days of Jesus and following no picnic, the Roman Empire notwithstanding. God's extravagant welcome means just that. God's embrace and touch of grace in order to then go forth means just that. As Copenhagen says, those who set out to share the good news often discover that they're changed in the process. Good news can and does travel both ways. I think we've experienced that, all of us. And your intention may be to do a good deed. And I suggest to you that you will experience that the deed doer isn't always going to be you. It's called grace. And it is amazing. The more you set about this discipleship stuff, faith truly becomes a pathway of discovery, personal discovery, congregational discovery. And the awareness, the blessing is that our hurts are healed. Healing comes, finds us. Our demons are cast out. And we become more consistent expressions of the kingdom way that Jesus taught. And you know that distinct movement from being God's frozen people to God's chosen people, God's called and sent people, then becomes a reality. There is so much before us, friends, as we are called forth in this day, in this time, to be disciples of the living God, a message of hope, of healing. There's so much before us, so much possibility, but you have to take it in hand. And there has to be a willingness to change. Not always easy on a good day. I know your story is different. Our stories are all different. But what stands the test of time, what stands before us in our today, is the reality of God's ever-present love. Hope that springs forth. We're here on a Sunday, the first day of the week, to remind us of Jesus' resurrection. Hope, new life, again and again and again. And in that hope, to go forth and change the world. Thaw out of it. We could all do with a little thaw, all right? And be honest with yourself and with one another. Don't try and be what you aren't, but be willing to be what you can be. God's love proclaims that hope, that potential, and the blessing is that healing and wholeness will find you as you seek to share it with others. May it ever be so.